So very good evening to one and all. I am Balaji. I head the digital strategy and solutions from APAC. What I'll do is continuing into the overview that Madhu gave in terms of our positioning in Luxoft as a whole, and particularly in APAC and India. I will dig a little deeper into the banking and capital markets. And the primary objective of this session, I saw that some people are asking what's the agenda or objective of this session. The objective of this session is to share with all the audience here our experiences in terms of today, what kind of challenges the banks, the BCM organizations are facing in adopting the modern technologies, the digital technologies, and how we as DXC Luxoft are partnering with them to help them adopt these technologies, right? But before I jump in, I would like to clarify certain terms upfront. So you already know that BCM stands for banking and capital markets. The organizations that we serve, we will call them as clients or customers or banks. So we may interchangeably use these terms. And the interesting point is that even these banks have clients. For instance, we all are clients to some banks, right? So we will call the clients of banks as end clients. Okay, so with those basic definitions, let's jump in. Now, today we live in a world of extremely great digital solutions and technologies. We keep hearing a lot of terms such as continuous intelligence, edge computing, data ops, multiple cloud solutions, and whatnot. We have to look at these clients from the BCM space, where they stand in terms of their ability to adopt these technologies, right? I saw some questions around DevOps. There's a perception that DevOps is just testing, right? Actually, DevOps is a complete subject on itself. And there will be a session after mine where my colleague will give a real life example of how we have actually helped a very large bank adopt some great DevOps practices and the kind of value that it has brought to them, right? So going back to my question, right? Where are banks with respect to their adoption of these technologies? Are they leveraging these technologies with the objective of delivering true value to the end clients? And that's very important because in today's highly competitive environment, it's always the organization that's able to deliver better value to end clients that wins the race, right? So the answer to that question is that the banks are probably on their route to adopt these latest digital technologies, but they are not yet there. Why they are not yet there, right? So let me for a moment take the banking sector. There are many banks which struggle a lot with legacy core banking systems. These are systems that are based, say, on mainframe, or they have been built over a long period of time. So they are very, very coupled, they are monolithic, and we simply cannot modernize such an architecture and make them leverage the modern services that we have on data, cloud, analytics, and so on. So the challenge is that banks are not able to go quickly to market in terms of giving modern services to their clients. Like a simple example would be to give a consistent experience to an end client across different channels like mobile, laptop, desktop, in person, in branch, and so on. The experiences could be very different, right? Because of these legacy systems. If we look at capital markets for a moment, what really first comes to our mind is the trade life cycle. I'm sure all of us do trading in some form, shares, equities. So capital markets organizations, which also I'll call as banks, essentially have a lot of trading activity within. One of the largest challenges they face is that these trading applications or systems have been built over years. They are very disparate, n number of systems, each of them having their own distinct user interfaces, workflows. And to compound to that problem, if you look at the mid and back office systems, these are the systems which have to essentially manage the regulatory risk reporting, treasury and services, and so on, right? And again, if these are very legacy, they are going to involve manual processes. They won't be able to leverage the modern services. And the net result is whether it's a bank, which is a core banking organization or a capital markets organization, they are severely constrained on their agility. They simply cannot quickly churn out innovative features to the clients. And also, it impacts the internal efficiencies, right? The IT organizations of which most of us are part of. We are doing the design and development, support of systems. We are severely constrained on efficiencies if we are stuck with such legacy technologies. Then how can we help banks come out of the stage and transform? That's primarily my focus for the rest of this session. Now, let me also tell you that Pragya has been very clear that I have only so much time. So this is like a complete world in itself, right? So I may not be able to cover all the depths, but what I'll definitely sincerely attempt to do is give a quick perspective and deep dive into certain specific digital technologies. So let's move on, right? Let's take a look at what we call the what, why, and how mapping of the digital transformation journey for clients, right? So let's start with what typically the banks need, what the client needs. Any client would want to be profitable. They're doing business because they have to generate profits. We already looked at the legacy estate issue and the need for transforming the mid to back office. Now, a couple of very important points I want to highlight here is that I think some of you or all of you may know that every bank has to comply to a lot of regulations that the governments and various bodies they enforce, right? So these are continuously evolving standards, right? Every year there may be something new coming up, and banks have to really prioritize that first. And one of the key inputs required to comply to such regulatory standards is consolidating data from various disparate systems within the bank. And that's essentially what the mid and back office systems are trying to do. Now, imagine if these are legacy systems with very complex architectures, how much effort it will take and how much expenditure it will result into for the banks to focus on that. Again, they are getting defocused from their need to innovate for clients. If I take the legacy estate, for example, the banks typically need handholding in couple of areas, right? The first is these legacy systems are supporting the current business for the bank. The bank cannot ignore them. So they need to depend on good service providers like us who can partner with them and ensure that we protect this legacy portfolio, keep it up and running. They also need help in arriving at a target system for the modern architecture, right? The modern architecture that they're trying to convert this legacy estate to. So they need help there. And that's where predominantly most of our digital solutions come into picture. And finally, while all this is happening, they also need handholding in a seamless transition from this legacy estate to this new platform. And that also includes the need to retire these existing applications very seamlessly and successfully. Now, every organization, not just banks, wish to leverage data. Today, we are living in a world of data, right? I spoke about continuous intelligence. Essentially, what it means is that how banks can continuously analyze their own data and take some meaningful decisions, right? I can give some quick examples here. One of the most important requirements for banks is to prevent fraud, to prevent crimes. So they have to analyze all the transactions, all the data on a day-to-day basis to ensure that frauds can be detected and remediated, right? Another example is most of these banking organizations love to observe the consumer patterns on the user behavior patterns for their end clients, and from that look at arriving for new product ideas, right? So data plays such a crucial role and every organization wishes to leverage data. But the challenge here is that this data is spread across disparate systems and it's never easy to consolidate them and start leveraging them for taking right decisions, right? Now, all these why, right? The what and the why that I covered, none of this can be fulfilled if the banks do not have a technology backbone, which is an IT organization which operates at pace and scale, which is agile. Now let's quickly look at how we help the clients or the banks realize these objectives, right? From our experience, we strongly believe that banks have to become a digital enterprise. What we mean by digital enterprise? We mean that in the DNA of the bank, there has to be digital innovation. That means a constant endeavor to explore these modern digital technologies, products, and solutions and see how gradually, right? Not as a big bang, but gradually, phase by phase, adopt those technologies and then deliver what we call as a digital experience, right? What we mean by digital experience, a lot of us know about customer experience, but just imagine if a bank doesn't have employees who are having a great experience doing their job, it doesn't have partners like us who are having a great experience partnering with the bank, how can they deliver great customer experience? So it's very important that there is a holistic great experience for all the stakeholders involved, and that is what we call as digital experience. And the only way to achieve that is by leveraging the modern digital technologies. And once this is achieved, the bank essentially becomes a set of highly collaborative digital teams, right? So in summary, we would like the banks to become a digital enterprise. So how can we help them achieve this state? Through our portfolio of service offerings. So as you can see here, there are three large categories of service offerings. The first one is our insights and advisory services. As you know, and Madhu also covered, we engage with lot of stakeholders, lot of organizations in the BCM space. So we are always having a very good clarity in terms of what are the latest trends in technologies or domain products and so on. So we actually provide those insights to our clients so that they get an idea about what's really hot in the market today, what kind of technologies are being leveraged. Now, these inputs help the banks arrive at what we call as their digital strategy, right? I would like to highlight one point here, that banks which do not first focus on what they want to achieve as a business objective, but rather just focus on adopting certain technologies just because they exist, will not succeed. Every technology adoption has to be driven by a business need. The business comes first. So our advisory services help banks to arrive at a digital strategy which is aligned to their business vision. Now, once the strategy is in place, we bring in our digital solutions capabilities. This is essentially the core of digital solutions, the complete spectrum that you see here at the bottom, right from digital architecture, user experience, data, analytics, cloud, blockchain, and so on. Somebody was asking about blockchain in the questions, right? So yeah, it's a complete spectrum of digital enablers, which are our capabilities. And we also uniquely combine these technology expertise with our domain expertise in the BCM space. And we help banks implement these solutions to achieve their strategy. Now, the last point here is, how would banks like to engage with partners like us? There are three possible models, and that's what we call as the digital engineering center. They may want the expertise from us. So then we provide the digital capacity, we provide our experts. And we are very proud to say that we have absolutely great experts across the globe in our organization, right? Now, many of the banks would want us to co-own implementation of these solutions. Then we form hybrid teams with them. And yes, there are many banks who also want us to completely own the implementation of this transformation journey, in which case we form autonomous squads. Okay, so in summary, we started with the challenges, the needs, and then we said that the banks have to become a digital enterprise to address them. And then we said that we enable them to do that with our service offerings. And then we gave a complete spectrum of what are the digital capabilities we have. Now, what we'll do is we will jump into three particular hot topics from this. Again, I'll try to cover as much as I can, but I may have to be brief. One, we will cover the digital user experience. Second, data and analytics. And third, cloud. So let's start with user experience. I think this is a term, as I said, many of us already know. Now let's look at a point here, right? Who are the users that we are talking about, to whom banks need to give a great experience, right? We also use a term called personas, right? So there are primarily three types of users. One, the end clients. I think we all understand what that means. Second is especially for the capital markets, the traders. They play a very crucial role because they perform one of the most important functions for the bank, which is trading, right? And then the third type of user is the rest of the what we call as business user community, who are customers to the IT organization of the bank. And they perform various functions from a business perspective, right? And predominantly their needs are driven towards getting insights into various business related data through various reports. So end clients, traders, the rest of the business user community. Let's take each of them and look at some of the challenges from a user experience perspective. Take an end client. I already mentioned that an end client can have a touch point with the bank up to 5 different types. It could be through post, it could be through voice, it could be in a branch, it could be through a mobile or tablet platform, it could be through a laptop or desktop, through a web interface, right? The biggest challenge that banks face is how to provide a consistent experience across all these channels. I'll take a simple example. I'm sure each one of us would have in some form or shape gone through a client onboarding process with banks when we're trying to open a new account, for example. And the same account creation can be executed through many of these channels. Can the banks provide a very consistent and similar experience? I really doubt. The reason being that each of these channels have their own backend legacy systems, their own processes. So it's a big challenge. Let's take next to the trader community. I already explained their biggest challenge is too many disparate set of trading systems, each having their own distinct user interface, right? Let's take the rest of the business user community. The biggest challenge they have is that their need for the right reports showing the right business information can always be challenged if the banks are using traditional technologies like business objects or Cognos, because any enhancements to such reports will have its own development lead time and the business users have to wait, right? So I have sort of covered the challenges. Now let's look at how we help banks overcome these challenges, right? The very first aspect of addressing this problem is we advise and partner with banks to help them become what we call as a customer centered organization. What it means is that I'll give a simple example. When the first time a bank releases a simple application on a mobile for an end client, they are basically providing an appealing user interface to the end client. Now, if the same user interface is very consistently made available across these different channels, then we say that the bank has provided a great user experience to the end client. And now this is just one application with maybe a few set of UIs. Talk about all the services that a bank offers, right? The account related services, the loan services, the investment product services. If they can provide a consistent experience to end clients for all these services across all these channels, then we say the bank has achieved true great customer experience. So this journey from a user interface to a user experience to a customer experience really needs a lot of streamlining of the internal systems, business processes, and so on. And we help banks with our experience to achieve that. What are the two key aspects in this transformation? We have to help banks create products from scratch, or banks also may just want to redesign their existing products. So these are the two key solutions that we provide. So what we do as part of that, if you look at a new product from scratch, there are two very important aspects, right? One, this has to be balanced in terms of being technically feasible, truly addressing the user need, and still being business relevant or business viable. That means it should be cost effective. We have to balance all the three. We can promise the moon, right? We can promise a lot to client, but it may actually incur so much expenses that it may not make a business sense, right? So we have to balance. That is one aspect. The second aspect is many times banks really suffer in arriving at what we call a minimum viable product, which is very essential to ensure that this balance is achieved and quickly we can go to market. And a lot of solutions for this creation from scratch of a product design involves studying the day in the life of these user personas, what we call as customer journeys, and the associated tools to do that, right? Now, if you have to redesign, it's basically taking the existing portfolio and trying to apply some enhancement to it. Like one classic example I can give, again in the reporting world, is a classic business object or Cognos based report, or let's say a bespoke JavaScript based report, can be migrated to the latest technologies like ClickSense or Tableau. And there are a lot of other such solutions available from the cloud providers as well, like for example Amazon QuickSight, Azure Power BI, and so on. Then what happens, we are essentially moving the power of generating the reports the way users want into the hands of users. I'll touch a little more on that in the next slide on data, but that's what we call as redesign, right? So that's how we help banks address these challenges. Very quickly, the journey that we typically follow, our innovation workshops help us jointly ideate new product ideas with the bank. Once that ideation is done, our discoveries and sprints help us rapidly prototype, arrive at the MVP configuration. Then our research and requirements ensure we convert it to a real backlog, a meaningful backlog. Once the backlog is ready, our design strategy solutions help create an architecture, a technical architecture, a business architecture, which meets the three parameters that I spoke about. Then the particular focus is on ensuring the right user interface. And once the user interface is taken care, the services that are delivered with those applications and user interfaces, so that we achieve through our service design solutions. And finally, when we have gone through this whole journey, that should help drive the right visualization, essentially enabling the users to get the right interface, the right reports for them to take the right decisions, right? And we do have our maturity assessment frameworks, which help continuously assess the maturity in terms of whether the bank has truly transformed, has the user experience really enhanced. I know I had to rush through this, but I think this would have given you a perspective, and definitely if time permits, we can always go a bit deeper. Let's move on to the next hot topic, data and analytics. I think almost all of us keep using this. We sleep, walk, drink, data, right? Today it's the world of data, big data and whatnot, right? Now, what is the fundamental problem statement for banks from a data perspective? I already mentioned there are disparate data sources, different types of data sources, different systems, right? The first challenge is how to consolidate these disparate data sources into a streamlined data lake. Many times you'll hear the term called as an enterprise data hub. Essentially, what it means is creating that data pipeline which will consolidate the data from these different sources, convert it into a model that is unified, that can address all the consumption requirements from the different consumers of data, and then the further processing on the data, right? I'll come to that in the next section here. This backbone of a data pipeline has to be established. So there are two aspects to it. One, it needs deep domain expertise, because these data models represent real life entities for the banks. So organizations like ours, we bring in our deep domain expertise to partner with the banks and help them consolidate the models from different systems into a unified data model. That's the first step. Once this data model is ready, we have to implement it. And the way we have to implement it is we have to establish this pipeline. And that's where all the typical aspects about ingestion, curation, consolidation, and all that, right, comes into picture, the ETL processes and so on. Now, this can get very complex, and many times banks get stuck with the complexity versus benefits analysis. So if I put in simple terms what the banks need, four or five very key aspects, right? One, automated ETL processes, right? Second, a visual way of visualizing these data pipelines, and also using this interface to decide the route that the data has to follow, right? Checking for errors through this user interface, right? Providing scalability. Essentially, the data may grow over seasons, the data volumes may come down off season, and so on and so forth. So there is a need to scale in and scale out. And that's where cloud solutions come into picture. We need to have resilience, a failover, and so on. We need to have security, right? The data has to go to the right consumers. So these are the typical requirements, right? So It's basically simplification, automation, and sophistication that's required to handle all these processes. And that's where we have such a wonderful suite of products that are available in the market today. One example I can give is Cloudera. Cloudera is like an end to end, right, data and analytics platform which can work on prem, which can work on cloud, right? And it is based on Hadoop technology, right? So this is something which supports Spark programming, for example. So we can do a lot of this automation using that, right? There are so many products available directly from the cloud vendors: Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Lake, AWS Glue, right? I can just keep going on, right? The key requirement here is to understand the specific complexities and needs of the client and then choosing the right technologies and products. And this is one aspect that my colleague Muthu is going to cover in his real life example, where we have done something like this and chosen the right technologies that suits the bank. Okay, let me move on. So let's assume that we have helped the bank establish this streamlined data lake. The obvious next requirement is to visualize. The business users will have to see this data, take meaningful decisions. What are the challenges? I already spoke about the traditional technologies, right? So the most important aspect is we should cut the dependency of the users from the IT teams like us to deliver changes to the reports, to enhance the reports, right? So we have to move this power to the users. How do we do that? Through self-service visualization. So technologies and products like ClickSense or Amazon QuickSight, or let's say Azure Power BI combined with the various cloud solutions, they essentially give this power to users. Anywhere from any device, in any format, with any contents, they can create the reports. So it's all up to the user. But does it work so simply? No. What it needs for this to work is a very strong data model at the backend. We have to look at different user personas, their reporting needs, and then ensure that the right data models are available. So that's what we call as a data visualization target model, where we have to again apply our deep domain and technology expertise to design these right target data models, which will ensure this extensibility, be it an increasing user base, be it a variety of user base, and so on, right? And obviously these reports need to have the right user experience. Okay, so in summary, we can provide this visualization analytics solution by leveraging the great products and solutions that we have in the market along with the domain expertise. Now, once that is achieved, the next step is advanced analytics. And I saw a question around artificial intelligence, right? So what are the key challenges today for a bank to adopt AI ML and advanced analytics solutions? The very first is that it needs a cultural change. Traditionally, users have always based their decisions based on the business insights. Now they have to start taking decisions on their products, on the processes, and whatnot based on data. So becoming data led from traditional business led, it's a cultural change. So obviously, we offer our advisory services and experience to help them make this transformation. The second challenge is lack of skills. I'll be open, today in the industry, not many experts exist who have a unique combination of domain and data science. Data science is a science in itself, completely technical, different algorithms and whatnot, right? Domain, which is very specific to BCM. A combination of these two, many of the banks struggle to have. So that prevents them from adopting such solutions. The third is definitely, for AI ML to work, we need very clean data. The data has to undergo various transformations from its fundamental form, and that is quite high cost, right? And the last but not the least challenge is that many banks are very proactive, do a lot of POCs, right, prototypes, but very few of them hit production and become production ready AI ML models that drive the day-to-day business decisions of the banks. So how can we solve these problems? There are two solutions. One, we develop what we call very specific solutions for the bank, what we call as bespoke analytics. Obviously, that's something which I can't discuss here because that's very specific to the clients. But we also have this other solution, what we call as out of the box analytics. So what out of the box analytics means is that there is an attempt to see if we can manage AI ML without having a deep expertise on AI ML. So how it is achieved? There are three types of products available in the market today. Machine learning as a service, which is say products like NIME or Data IQ. What they do is they provide a graphical user interface where the users can just drag and drop the various components of the AI pipeline, and then they can execute a part of the pipeline or the whole pipeline. They can review the results based on the different types of data sets, training data set or whatever it is. But it involves a lot of manual processing, not coding. So these are like no code platforms, but they need a lot of manual processing. But still, it's great in terms of having a drag and drop functionality. The second type of solution is what we call as machine learning as a service. So this to some extent abstracts the need for knowledge on AI, right? And these are the products which basically represent a set of cloud-based services, right? For creating the pipelines, for running the algorithms, so on and so forth. Data robot is one such technology. For example, the advantage of that is that a lot of the infrastructure, provisioning, execution, creation of the pipelines, and so on is taken care. And the banks can just focus on the core business logic. So it's one level of sophistication over the manual self-service. What really is like the nirvana stage is what we call the automated machine learning. These are products like say Microsoft Cognitive Services, where there are pre-trained data sets. So AI is essentially what, right? Basically, it is say natural language processing to look at loads of unstructured information, derive patterns out of it. Let's say if a robot is trying to answer customer queries over a call, right? So this robot has to understand what the customer is saying. So that is like speech analytics, right? So these automated machine learning, they have pre-built models. So all we need to do is give them the data, right? We don't need to go through training and all that. This automated machine learning product will give you the final output. So this completely eliminates the need to have AI skills, right? And then finally, developer platforms are what we call ML ops. These are essentially the end-to-end platform to take from development to production AI ML solutions, right? So Converge.io, for example, Anaconda, these are various products. But I would say this is really the advanced stage. Not many banks are able to achieve this. Okay, so in summary, we help streamline the data lakes. That's the most prominent problem we see even today for clients. Once that is done, we help establish the right visualization and analytics through reporting. And once that is achieved, then we really go into the advanced AI ML, and many banks are still catching up on that. Finally, I'll spend a few minutes on cloud and DevOps. So here, let me, I think there were some questions on DevOps also, so I'll try to answer. Now, I think all of us know this as a service concept. So this has been driving the industry for ages now, right? But we have really reached a stage where absolutely unimaginable SaaS products have come up in the market. What is the primary objective of cloud, right? Number one, cloud provides banks that flexibility to scale in and scale out infrastructure, right? But of late, all the cloud vendors have started providing such wonderful platform as a service and software as a service products that it's way beyond just primary infrastructure scalability, right? So for example, many of you would have heard about the serverless architecture, right? Or let's say the fully managed services to manage containers, for instance. So a lot of the basic infrastructure environment provisioning activities are taken off from the plate of application developers, and the developers can focus on the core business logic. Then why banks are not adopting cloud very quickly? There are primarily three challenges, right? Number one, every bank has a constraint with data. The first thing we have to understand is cloud essentially in its simplest form is a public based infrastructure. Banks under the regulatory obligations cannot move their data to a public infrastructure. So that's the first bottleneck that they face, right? The second bottleneck is that hence banks have to go for either a private cloud setup on premise, or they have to go for a hybrid cloud solution, which is a combination of on-prem and cloud. And whenever it's hybrid or on on-prem as a private cloud solution, the complexities are huge because a lot of fundamental work needs to be done on the infrastructure, environment, and so on by the bank. Of course, there are solutions available now like hosted private cloud and virtual private cloud and things like that. But nevertheless, it's always a huge effort, right? So data confidentiality, the complexities of a private or hybrid cloud solution, the last, migrating existing on-prem applications to cloud. It's never easy, right? It goes back to the original challenge where these are disparate applications. We just cannot lift and shift and put them on cloud. So these are the typical challenges. How do we help address these challenges, right? So we have three types of solutions. One, a lot of advisory and assessment, right? So all these challenges will have to be visualized through this portfolio assessment that we have to do. We have to take some very critical decisions in terms of what we need to do with applications. For example, if we look at the data confidentiality issues, we need to look at probably splitting the data models, the data that can go on public, the data which has to stay on-prem, and then design the hybrid cloud solutions around that, and so on and so forth, right? So a lot of advisory will actually do the discovery on the bank's portfolio and then arrive at the required outcome in terms of strategy and vision. And many banks also need our help to assess the different vendors, because almost every cloud vendor, Amazon, Google, all of them actually provide exactly same type of services. So how to align it to their needs. Now, once we have helped them on the strategy and vision, the next step is around planning the migration, right? And one important aspect here is the cloud native architecture design. This is where we decide whether an application just needs to be rehosted, where we can simply lift and shift, right? Or an application needs to be refactored, which is we don't change the functionality, but we may have to little bit change the architecture. Or we have to re-platform, that means change the operating system from on-prem to cloud, or change the language, say for example, mainframe to Java, so on and so forth, right? So a lot of decisions have to be taken on what will be the application architecture in the target state on cloud. So that's a very key aspect. The second key aspect, and that's DevOps, the question that you asked. So DevOps is not just a testing automation, right? DevOps today combined with cloud gives the power to banks to end to end improve the efficiencies of their product development. Why does it? Because of the kind of different product services that are available. And this one question, I'll leave it to Muthu to answer in the next session, because you can see live how we have come up with a great DevOps and cloud based solution delivering value to clients. So please hold on till then. You will get a lot of answers from that session. And finally, once we have the migration roadmap ready, we help them deliver and transform. So in summary, right, if the audience on this call is interested to know what are the technologies and skills to focus, if we have to make a career in today's world, these are some of the most hot, popular technologies. It's not an all comprehensive list, but in our experience, we have seen that these typically rule the world, right? And if you are able to pick one or more skills out of these technology set, it's guaranteed that it's going to be an interesting journey for you in today's modern world of digital solutions.